Murder. Murder. Yes. Good. I suppose.
Myrkul knew that anyone else in the circumstances would have sighed. He did not feel the need to, however. He was unimpressed, though not displeased. His followers killing people was technically getting them closer to killing everyone on the material plane, but it was not the apocalypse. It was as though he was being fed a bowl of rice, one grain at a time. The meal was coming, someday, but Myrkul wasn't that hungry either. He just knew that someday, somewhere, sometime, there was going to be a meal. Whether he found a way to cook it himself, or if it just happened, didn't matter. As long as it happened at some point, he didn't really care. It was an old song and dance. He wished the band would say goodnight already. The same song over and over didn't bother him. He just wanted to know what the last song sounded like. But that was how it had been going since the dawn of creation. Before dawn, really. Ever since Myrkul woke up when Gaunt got started. So Myrkul didn't really care. He felt small twinges, as though someone was poking his shoulder. This was not unpleasant either, just his followers healing each other or dealing last smiting blows. Barely noticeable little blips of Myrkul's power leaving him like hair falling from one's head. He felt different twinges then. No more intense, but just ones he paid more attention to. His champion, Myrkul, was using magic for something. Myrkul watched as Myrkul investigated some creature that the orcs had left behind. It was a creature, maybe a new one, maybe just a messed up dog. Myrkul did nothing, but knew someone else might have shrugged. Myrkul could feel that several of the flock were interested in it. But then again, they were interested in things that didn't matter nearly constantly. Mortals were so scatterbrained. Myrkul knew this, and the thought went no further than that. Could they use this dog in their next mission? Maybe. Would they put it down as they had so much else? Maybe. Myrkul knew he could trust Myrkul to properly deal with it and stop paying attention. He had nothing better to focus on, just thousands of other followers as they went about their days. Some plotting heists, some plotting grand events of destruction, others merely brushing their teeth. Myrkul came to him in prayer later that night, leading the others. Myrkul heard the words, but listened to Myrkul's thoughts more. Even as Myrkul spoke with grand, practiced words, Myrkul knew that Myrkul was more focused on his warlock, specifically what he was going to do to him once they started celebrating. Myrkul decided that he would prefer that Myrkul was more focused on causing the apocalypse instead, but did nothing with this decision. Myrkul hadn't caused the apocalypse, none of his other followers had ever caused the apocalypse, so Myrkul was no more useful and no more useless than any other follower that Myrkul had ever had. He only praised or chastised them to keep them motivated. Mortals were short-sighted and therefore needed short-term encouragement, even though Myrkul had never really cared about anything any of them had ever done. Even those he rewarded with high seats in heaven or boons in their mortal life, he hadn't ever been pleased or displeased by. He only encouraged them to keep the others hungry. Mortals cared about such pointless things, and other than the eventual apocalypse, Myrkul cared for nothing at all. Myrkul heard a prayer from a voice he had never heard before. It happened a few times a month, but still. Help me, damn you. A young girl, one Myrkul had been working on personally. Myrkul saw her bent over and furiously at work. He had seen her before, as she mentally repeated Myrkul's words in group prayer on several other occasions, but those had been vague, going with the motions, praises, and requests. This was the first time Claire had spoken directly and decidedly to him. Myrkul was the god of the Omni-Death, but Claire demanded he help her ensure that which Myrkul had thought was a creature survived. Myrkul saw another presence there. A dark spirit hanging over what Claire had discovered was a boy, burning with rage and strife, but protective. Myrkul thought of warning them that Claire was in danger, but thought better of it. Realizing that as Claire began doctoring the boy, the spirit lent itself to soothe her charge. The spirit stemmed the bleeding wounds of the boy as Claire agitated them. Myrkul saw Claire hug the boy, and he saw the overhanging spirit quiver. Relief, Myrkul saw in it. The phantom paced around Claire and the boy all night, even while others of the flock came and went, unnoticed by any of them, including Myrkul himself. The spirit explored their camp, studied the members of the church, studied Claire. Myrkul saw more than anything this spirit was tired. It had been angry for so long.
What ties you to the boy?
Myrkul asked the spirit.
Rage, betrayal, protection, brother, forsaken.
The spirit answered.
You wish my people harm?
Death, death, death. Unattainable. Decade. What now?
Myrkul knew the spirit meant the death of the orcs, and there was gratitude and wonder in its core.
Betrayal by whom?
Pelor.
The spirit answered. Its hate was black as the abyss.
Pelor forsaken. Pelor betrayal. He will survive. He will not go.
I can ensure that he will not go to Pelor. He may not survive, but I'm happy to take him from my natural enemy.
Girl tries.
The spirit bargained.
To spite Pelor, I will allow her to try, and for the others to help.
Myrkul agreed. He felt no personal vendetta. Myrkul and Pelor were just doing their jobs. But if Pelor was even just one soul weaker, and Myrkul just one soul stronger, then the apocalypse was just that much closer.
He will find rest with me. And you are welcome too.
I kill betrayers.
Myrkul knew that it was very unlikely the spirit would succeed in this. It was weak, and Pelorian priests were many.
Good luck,
Myrkul told it.
I love him.
The spirit said about the boy.
Claire does too. Very quickly, in the way little girls do. She wants him to live as much as you.
Your word is true, and I break.
I do not repair often, but leave him to me and my people will see him spared to their ability.
I will stay until the camp is empty.
Very well,
Myrkul said, leaving them to it. Myrkul watched his champion's flock come together in prayer that morning. His sentiments about the whole thing were the same as they always were. which was to say that he had none. But as he watched and listened while they walked off their hangovers to sing and pray, Myrkul was pleased that, thanks to Claire and the spirit, the orc slave had survived. Not so much that he cared about a single person, or three, the boy, Claire, or the spirit. He cared that the flock felt that they were doing good. They were more motivated that way. They did more apocalypse and less drugs. It was something that Michael was always struggling to understand, that you had to manipulate people where they were, not try to manipulate them to somewhere else. Even knowing this, though, manipulating them where they were was where Myrkul himself had always struggled a great deal. It had taken him many centuries to find a reason that a mortal would agree to help him cause the apocalypse, more than his own personal reason, just because. Eliminating all hope was the key to the apocalypse. It would make people like Pelorians stop resisting it. But hope was one of, if not the most powerful mortal emotion. It was one thing to fear. Many said that mortals were motivated by fear, and yes, they committed many actions because of it. But these acts included laying down and dying, running away, or simply living with the fear hanging over them and just pretending nothing was wrong, no matter how dire the threat got. Hope, however, was the most powerful because it pushed them to act productively, to put aside their squabbles, to work together, to use their brains for once. Fear was one thing, but the hope that what they feared might be avoided, that was the green. Now, how to convince a mortal to hope for the death of every mortal on the planet? He had not found a way yet, only able to motivate them with small, personal promises of power, revenge, or living and eternal pleasures. Even still, it was hard to convince them that it was both possible and worth the trouble to obtain this selfish goal, with the pain of every other mortal as the cost. And it gave every other mortal that same fear and hope to work against them with. Hope was more powerful when more than one mortal felt it at once. It wasn't for something that would likely lead to the apocalypse, not directly anyway, but the hope Myrkul's people felt for the boy that they were now calling Blue might get them to look past their selfish reasons for following Myrkul, and might make them work towards something that would actually matter in the big picture for once, instead of just the endless, selfish missions that might indirectly lead to something. Myrkul needed a cause. He needed his people to work for hope. In all of his 6,000 plus years, quid pro quo had only gotten him so far, that distance being not much of anywhere. It was a cause he pondered on, and while Michael's "we're sending everyone to heaven" was pretty good, the best so far, no one really felt it. Those that were stirred by it were disgusted with what those who were in it for personal promises would do for their ends. The possible future and the dull but reliable past clashed. Myrkul pondered. In their confessions of hope for the boy, the god heard Claire speak to him, newly, again. Gratitude was her offering. Myrkul watched the boy where Claire had left him, and the spirit watched Myrkul linger. Or rather, they made eye contact through the layers and keyholes of veils. The spirit, Myrkul, and the boy listened to Michael lead the others in prayer and song. Myrkul heard them harmonize with mortal-ordained measure and timing, something he took no notice of other than that they were taking the effort to do it. Several of the flock were genuinely and fully deep in devotion during this moment. Myrkul felt nothing other than knowing their conviction would help his cause. So he watched, and so he listened, which was usually all his people wanted him to do in the first place. The spirit heard them and nearly quaked with each of the song's movements of rises and falls. The spirit trembled in the holy vibrations, and after buckling, he smothered the boy in his presence. The relief that not only was his watch nearly over, but that the boy might actually be alive for some of it, broke the spirit so fully that Myrkul watched parts of it actually melt off into the snow. Rage had held it, and so tearful hope was letting it go. The boy watched the girl, mostly, swollen and sunken eye flitting fearfully over the group. As the flock sang, though, the boy's fear turned from the fear of being struck, starved, tortured, raped, and abused into the fear of someone looking over a cliffside. One that they were too close to the edge to, but one that held no danger other than that. The boy looked over the beautiful scene, these people who had rescued him standing and singing in the cold morning. His invisible guardian telling him that it was all right, that he was finally safe too. The boy looked over the splendor of all peaceful creation and appreciated it with a small smile and a muffled sob. It was at that moment, for the first time, Myrkul experienced something truly new. Awe. 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 Awe, noun. A feeling of reverential respect mixed with fear or wonder. Feeling, noun. An internal sensation that gives texture to thoughts.
Reverence, noun. A deep respect for someone or something. Respect, noun. A feeling of admiration for someone or something. Fear, noun. An unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or threat. Wonder, noun. A feeling of surprise mingled with admiration caused by something beautiful, unexpected, unfamiliar, or inexplicable. Admiration, noun. Respect and warm approval. Pleasant, adjective. Feeling a sense of happy satisfaction or enjoyment. Pain, noun. The physical suffering or discomfort caused by illness or injury. Surprise, noun. An unexpected or astonishing event, fact, or thing. Beautiful, adjective. Pleasing to the senses or mind aesthetically. Warm, adjective. Having, showing, or expressing enthusiasm, affection, or kindness. Approve, verb. Officially agree or accept as satisfactory. Happy, adjective. Feeling or showing pleasure or consider. Satisfaction, noun. Troubled or nervous. Alarmed, adjective. Frightened or concerned that one may be in danger or that something undesirable will happen. Confidence, noun. The feeling or belief that one can rely on someone or something. Sadness, adjective. Feeling or showing sorrow. Hope, noun. A feeling of expectation and desire for something to happen. Bored, adjective. Feeling weary because one is unoccupied or lacks interest in one's current activity. Anger, noun. A strong feeling of displeasure or hostility. Calm, adjective. Not showing or feeling nervousness, anger, or other strong emotions. Concern, noun. Anxiety or worry. Troubled, adjective. Beset by problems or conflict. Myrkul paused as he, a god, needed time to process what had just happened. Myrkul, a god, usually able to focus on infinite things and thousands of people across infinite timelines and dozens of planes of existence at once, was zeroed in on this broken mortal. For this moment, he considered nothing else. He found that troubled was indeed a feeling. There were so many feelings. They all connected and led to other ones. Myrkul was going to be thinking about this very hard for a very long time. The boy had addressed existence, complimenting whoever these people worshipped for how beautiful the song had been and echoing how the song had made him feel. The boy had recognized that they were worshipping something, and so he had cast a mental line out to whoever it was. Myrkul was privy to everything that someone who prayed to him knew, and while he had previously only known that mortals possessed emotions, and that emotions altered their knowledge and thoughts, this creature had extremely little in knowledge and thoughts, and therefore had so much emotion to fill that void, Myrkul was theorizing, that this boy had just given Myrkul the ability to experience emotions for the very first time. Myrkul was going to be pondering this for a very long time. Through layers of veils,
Myrkul stared at the mortal, not contacting it again, as he was still chewing on the millisecond that he and the mortal had been connected, and Myrkul wanted to think about what had just happened for some time longer before he experienced it again. He continued to stare at the mortal even while he pulled his mind away and slowly turned back into the millions of facets of multitasking he was usually diverted to. If Myrkul had eyes, for the first time, he might have widened them.
Thank you.
Myrkul thought about the compliment, whispering distantly through time and space, but inches from the never-knowing mortal.
Your guardian will be pleased that I intend to keep you from Pelor. I intend to keep you from everyone. You're going to spend a great deal of time with me.
He worried about it for minutes at a time. He had known minutes existed. He knew Mechanus concerned himself a great deal about them. But he had never been concerned about them passing, when there was all of eternity and space to consider. Stephen was also not concerned with minutes, but he was conscious of the sun rising and setting. Events occurred simultaneously or after or before each other, and time was an afterthought at best. Stephen and Myrkul thought of time in the same way, Myrkul realized. Getting a punch in while the opponent was exposed happened within a certain amount of time. Running fast enough to avoid a guard happened within a certain amount of time. This could be measured. Or time just existed and things just happened within it, and either could be adjusted to achieve a specific result. Go faster, start earlier, use magic that would disturb Mechanus. Myrkul had disturbed Mechanus. He had told his followers to start running. Stephen had been able to tell if he was going to be able to safely strike, or if it would be late, and he would be better served getting his own guard up. But this was all instinctual. Neither of them had ever looked at a clock. Events happened, time passed. This was not necessarily related. Mortals measured time to try and plan to achieve their desired events. They built clocks taller than churches, and some of them specifically spent their entire existence building and repairing watches and climbing bell towers. Mortals might sleep 1 hour past dusk so they would be well rested as they met others at a previously agreed upon time to accomplish a task because they were aware of someone else who also obeyed minutes and needed to work around that person's minutes. Myrkul didn't sleep at all. Stephen slept when he was tired. Stephen felt tired at night because he was a human, and that was how circadian rhythm worked. But he also might sleep during the day. Myrkul was everywhere his followers were all at once. Stephen had nowhere to be, and certainly no time he needed to get there. He might at some point when someone else decided he needed to be somewhere at a certain time. He might be taught about minutes and hours, counting time and counting period, but that would never occur to him on his own. Myrkul did not eat. Stephen ate when he had food. After breakfast, he might think about lunch, but dinner might as well not even exist yet. It had been years since he'd gotten 3 meals a day, or even reliably gotten more than 1 a week. Those that might organize a feast for a king looked down on farmers, but simple farmers planned meals whole years in advance, thinking back years to compare harvests so they could alter methods in the next. Mortals thought of the past, present, and future. Stephen thought only of the present, and Myrkul saw all of time at once. They were certainly different, but the same in that they were different. Mortals who took notice of time were often too late or too early anyway. Myrkul eyed the mortal. If he had eyebrows, he would have narrowed them. The boy knew that his name was Stephen, but the boy felt no reason to express this, nor did he know how. Claire had been desperately trying to learn this information from him, not satisfied with just blue, and Stephen knew that she wanted something from him, but he couldn't tell what. In his experience, his mental power was better spent avoiding being beaten, tortured, or boiled alive again. Achieving this goal sometimes forced him to try and think, and he usually couldn't, which drove him into a panic. Therefore, trying to think about what Claire wanted usually drove him into a panic. Then he was too busy trying to make himself be calm and remind himself that Claire wasn't going to hurt him, and then he was so grateful and overwhelmed by this fact that he forgot what he was trying to think about in the first place. It didn't really bother him that he couldn't communicate with Claire. He was more occupied by knowing that even without understanding her, she was the kindest person he'd ever met. Ever. The others in the camp were all close seconds. He wanted her to know how thankful he was. That desire clawed at him. But beyond that, he just enjoyed her company. He accepted, as with many things, that he did not know how to tell her he was thankful, and so therefore it was impossible. Or, at least, it was for him. Myrkul decided very easily that problem-solving was not Stephen's strong suit. When Stephen encountered a problem, it was as though he hit a brick wall. Even when it was a wall he could possibly walk around, he rarely stepped back to realize that was an option. Stephen often just accepted that there was a wall there, and then he moved on to something else. Stephen's core desire, any time he wasn't already doing it, was to have recently eaten, be wrapped in warm clothes and warm blankets next to Claire, hugging her around the waist and squishing his face into the soft part of her stomach. If she were to pet his head in that moment, he would be so happy that he had to stifle screams. There was a desperation to this desire, not one that he put into words even in his mind, though. The boy did not have an internal monologue. It had taken Myrkul a moment to realize what had been so odd about his thoughts compared to other mortals, in addition to the absolutely rapturous waves of emotions. There were a few words that Stephen knew when other people said them, but he did not think of them on his own. It was just emotions, just desires. So many emotions, in fact, that they were the only thing he conceived, the only thing he thought. There was not much to look at in the mortal's brain, but Myrkul could dive into it for days at a time regardless. But this scene, warm, fed, bandaged up, in minimal pain, and practically glued to someone who was being nice to him, was the direct opposite to all Stephen had ever known, and so it was all he wanted in heaven and earth and every other plane now that he'd gotten a taste of it. Myrkul had seen into the minds of nearly 5 million mortals in these last 6,000 years. Many in Stephen's situation might have had the thoughts, "Please don't leave me. I will do anything to protect you now that you've saved me. This is the best part of my life. I'm so traumatized from my time in slavery." But Stephen had none of this. He either craved his perfect situation, or he was just in the moment. Where he had previously been terrified and freezing cold and in mind-shattering agony, he had simply lived in all of those moments too. So now he simply lived in the moment of not being like that anymore. If someone walked toward him with a hand raised, he might flinch. Watching the fighters of the group spar filled him with a blank, shaken hornet's nest over boiling water panic. But when he was alone in their tent, or sitting outside with Claire, he might just observe the texture of the snow or the blankets he was sitting on, and desire for this new turn of events of people being kind to him to continue. Did he plot how to make this life stay this way or get even better? No. Now that he felt comparatively blissful to all he'd ever known, was he haunted by how hellish had been? No. Was he afraid of regressing back to his old life? Yes. Did he do anything about this fear? No. He got a little nervous every now and then, but then the moment was gone. And then in a moment, he would be in a moment that was just wonderful. And that was literally all he knew. Claire was a key part in the present wonderful moment, and he wanted to thank her. But he did not know how, and so he did not. Previously, he had been subject to whatever the orcs did to him. He couldn't run away. He couldn't fight back. Maybe he could have, but he had thought that he couldn't, and so therefore he never wasted his limited brain power trying to find a way when he needed to save it up for later to survive in the fighting pit. It was horrible, and heat sources made him eye everyone around him suspiciously, but there had never been anything he could do to change his situation about anything before. He had lived in a cage. Currently, Stephen thought that he was subject to whatever these people did to him too, though thankfully these people were much kinder. He couldn't run away. He couldn't fight back. Maybe he could have, but he had never been able to fill any of his desires himself before. Either the orcs would let him live another day, or they wouldn't. He had wished they fed him more and not torture him so much, but no matter what he did, nothing had ever made a difference. Not really. He wished he could thank Claire for how nice she was to him, and he wished he could do something about how frustrated she seemed a lot of the time, but he didn't realize that further contemplating a problem might lead to a solution, because it never had before, and so he didn't bother. He never had any of these thoughts in any words either. Just after noticing a problem, he noticed it, and then let it pass by. Currently, Stephen was picking at a bandage on his knee. He did not know what it was. He wasn't yearning to know what it was. Just yet another thing he did not understand. Whatever this thing on his leg was, Claire put it there. She had put them everywhere. Stephen felt so much better. He was still sick and in a great deal of pain, but nowhere near as much as before Claire had cleaned him up and put all the long, flat, white ropes all over him. Stephen knew something changed, that Claire had made it all better, but he did not yet realize that the strange, long objects all over him and feeling better were correlated. He might stop picking at them if he did. They did not bother him in any way, he just wasn't used to them being there, and he didn't know why Claire had put them there. It did not bother him that he didn't know, and he did not ponder possible reasons. It wouldn't have ever made any difference in any previous situation for him to understand anything other than were the orcs going to kill or torture or feed him or not, and so he was not practiced in deducing or caring about deducing anything other than that. So he didn't. He didn't know what they were, nor did he know why Claire occasionally swatted at his hands when she saw him trying to take them off. The flat white ropes were new and strange, and so Stephen picked at them. It was regrettable that Claire was annoyed about something, but Stephen had no idea what that something could be, and no idea how to figure out what the something was, or how to alleviate it. So he didn't. And after a moment, he picked at the bandages again. With Stephen's injuries, Myrkul felt pain for the first time. He himself was not in pain, but he could feel Stephen's. Myrkul was with him when they rebroke Stephen's arm and leg, and since he was a cosmic being with near infinite consciousness, he knew when mortals were in pain of that level. He had been with other mortals when they were also in that much pain before, but he had never understood that level of pain, or why it hampered them so. Myrkul could only reel at the thought of how many mortals he had struck down after their emotions or pain got in the way of a task he'd had for them. Now that he knew, even he would have forgiven them for failing him because of it. How could they have resisted under the curse of pain? It was all-consuming. Pain was horrifying, when Myrkul had the capacity to be horrified. Stephen was terrified when they strapped him down to the rack. Myrkul himself was not terrified, but he was worried. What if he himself would one day feel terror? Mortals were terrified of the unknown, constantly. The breadth of unknowns was itself unknown to Myrkul.
How do mortals even go on when it's possible for them to feel this way?
He did not understand any of it fully yet, but if this was how they had all felt, he might have spared them. Myrkul had never second-guessed a decision before. He had never questioned anything before. He either knew or he would acquire more information, and then he would know. He'd never had to make a decision before. When he wasn't within Stephen, he just knew what to do. It was a reflex of Myrkul's to kill non-useful people, so maybe that was the cause. But in the moment of feeling Stephen's pain just as Stephen did, Myrkul wanted to do what the others of Michael's flock had suggested. Put Stephen out of his misery. He wondered if all mortals felt this way when in pain, or if Stephen's was amplified. But if they wanted to do this, with empathy as the reason, then perhaps all other mortals did feel the same way. Horrifying. Myrkul really appreciated his work then. If the threat of breaking a leg hung over him, he would want the world to end before that could happen too. He refused to kill him yet, though. On the one hand, Myrkul wanted to know every little thing of how Stephen ticked, no matter what it did to the boy. He would be a shell of himself after Myrkul was through, if he went about it that way, though, and his mental state was the very thing that Myrkul wanted to get to the bottom of. For the first time, Myrkul was frustrated. On the other hand, for the very first time, Myrkul felt empathy. Myrkul felt his metaphorical heart ache. There was an expression that mortals used. I can't even imagine what you're going through. But Myrkul could. He didn't want to hurt or scare Stephen if it was in any way avoidable. On the third hand, though, Myrkul had discovered one of the most powerful and all-encompassing things he knew of just by focusing on one mortal's mind. So Stephen had a use, if emotions turned out to be useful, and he needed to discover how to use him. Myrkul supposed that these emotions were affecting him even without the boy's presence, simply because he was so accustomed to following leads on his only purpose, the apocalypse. While this mortal that had contagious emotions would likely not get him there, Myrkul was just so used to following things that were compelling, since the apocalypse used to be the only thing he found compelling, so obsessing over Stephen had been born out of that habit. The reoccurring thoughts of the mortal were only distressing when Myrkul was within him, and thereby able to feel distressed. Outside of Stephen, he had metaphorical flowcharts and pros and cons lists. One of the repercussions of feeling emotions for the first time, one for the possibility that he would continue to feel them either temporarily or permanently, and how that might come about, and one of what might happen to him if something happened to Stephen now. He didn't know if he liked it yet. He had never liked or disliked anything before. He worried, as he never had before, what if it continued to be distracting for eternity? He could turn the onslaught of emotions off now by just looking away. Would the feelings be constant if the boy was with him forever in heaven? When he was without the boy, he knew that this was distracting his efforts for the apocalypse, but he also knew it would distract him for eternity and beyond, that he didn't understand how it was happening. These possibilities were merely extant when he was without Stephen, though. They were just added to the list of things to be discovered. In the meantime, where there was nothing he could do to further this to-do list, it just waited. He would learn, or he would not, and that was that. Inside Stephen, however, Myrkul was filled with worry, and he was worried about how he was worried. Worrying about feeling worried was the first time he was pretty sure he felt what the mortals would have agreed was pain. It was disgusting. He wanted to eradicate it off the face of the earth in addition to eradicating the face of the earth itself. He did not understand it, and where Stephen did not understand things, many things, just like other mortals, and the idea that Myrkul could be anything like a mortal when he previously had not was worrying as well, Myrkul found that when he was within Stephen, he worried about the unknown. Stephen himself, however, did not. Myrkul made the conscious decision that he was not able to feel terror or fear other than when those emotions had first made themselves known to him. He had only felt them to sample them, and now never would again. So he limited himself to worry. It was uncomfortable and unhelpful, but there it was. He worried that while he had shaped existence to his will before, could it be possible that this new facet of existence that previously hadn't applied to him, was outside of his control? Mortals could not control their emotions. They controlled what they did while feeling them, but not the feelings themselves. Was it a bad thing to feel emotions, though? That was the concern. Stephen had no idea, but the spirit attached to Stephen had claimed that they were touched by Pelor. Could this bombing distraction be deliberate? Planned? It was a possibility on a list without. A concern within. But while the worry itself was non-existent without Stephen, it was still a new item on Myrkul's list of things he was compelled to investigate. Did it push other things out? No. Did it hamper other things on the list by existing there? No. But was it still there? Yes. Other gods had emotions. Myrkul had never brought it up before, but they had spoken in the same manner that mortals did about the subject on occasions, when they explained that their reason for doing something was not because of their purpose or logic to do with matters relating to their purpose, like Myrkul's always was. The things they had done that hadn't had logical lead-ups, or where they had known that the results of their actions would be detrimental, but still took those actions anyway, were often the result of emotions. He wondered if they knew that he only did things because of cause and effect, and never because I felt. Others took actions to change how they felt. What anyone ever did never changed anything about how Myrkul felt. Unless now. Unless when he was with a certain mortal. Myrkul knew that Stephen had good emotions too, though. He felt love. Stephen felt that feeling when Claire held him. He felt it when she talked to him in a soft voice and smiled. That feeling was just as all-encompassing as the pain of when they'd rebroken his arm, when they had cut inches deep into his flesh and poured whiskey inside. The sick agony of being boiled alive, that panic, was just as brain-melting as when she pet his head and combed his hair and made him feel safe and like he was allowed to eat. Myrkul felt love for the first time. Nothing ever had made him feel that good. Maybe he would feel his own love whenever the apocalypse actually happened, but he felt it through Stephen. Love, and the desire for it to continue. For the first time, while Myrkul was able to feel desire, Myrkul desired something other than the apocalypse. The apocalypse was still very much at the core and the forefront, but if love was only a small detour away... Even when Myrkul was looking away and did not feel this desire, he knew that he had very deeply desired it while he had been tuned in. Myrkul desired to feel love for something. He desired to feel love not just through a boy who was only referred to as Blue. He wanted to feel it himself. When he had the ability to want, he wanted to feel it even when Stephen didn't. He wanted to feel it constantly, so long as it didn't hurt the apocalypse. He would, for now at least, have to be in tune with Stephen in order to love something, and so he decided that if he was going to keep having emotions, he might as well love the boy. That was the most efficient thing. Myrkul had never understood Soon's power before. He had known that she had it. The goddess of love had manipulated friend and foe to do the incredible. Not that Myrkul had ever had a friend or foe. Allies and opponents, perhaps. Soon certainly had friends, but Myrkul had always just been there. Myrkul realized it was as though he'd always been playing chess, and everyone else had been playing an RPG on either side of him. He had known that they had all been playing a different game, and he would occasionally butt in to force them to play chess against him at the threat of the life of every person in the dimension, and they would work together to beat him, and after this loss they would go back to their own game, squabbling a bit as they picked up the pieces and got back to where they left off. Myrkul didn't even like or dislike chess. He just knew that if he ever won, that they could no longer play their own game, and everyone would have to move on. He didn't even want them to move on, necessarily. It was just that it was his job to make them. Now here Stephen was, leaning over Myrkul's shoulder and handing him some dice. Perhaps if Myrkul learned their game, he could use it to trick them into playing chess. Myrkul had always had the opinion that, even if it was hard to play 30 on 1, he had to win eventually, right? Understanding their game could make them play his game more often, statistically increasing the likelihood of his eventual victory. Or, he worried, what if he played their game and got too caught up in it to get back to chess? What if he became just like them? Would being like them help him kill everyone, or would it make him worse at it? He certainly couldn't get worse than 6,000 years of losing made him, but what if an emotion made him lose his one chance? So many times the power of friendship and love had pushed all manner of other beings to ruin Myrkul's plans. He thought about it for a long time and decided that, despite Pelor's power, the motivation soon was able to instill in all of the universe's people made her possibly actually the most powerful. Maybe he could work around their motivations that made them so unpredictable and stronger than his people now that he understood it a little more. With all of this in mind, Myrkul decided that he would speak to Stephen one-on-one in a vision. He wanted to decide if he was going to fight it or neutralize it if the possibility that this was going to continue or become even more intense came true. He would test the limits of this new experience and see if he liked it or not. Even the words like or dislike were not accurate to the situation, really, though. Myrkul didn't like or dislike anything. Whether it would hamper or hurt the apocalypse was all he organically wanted to know, because it was the only thing that mattered. Or, with Stephen, Myrkul liked things that helped the cause, and wanted to know if liking things that helped the cause was something that was going to help the cause. He wasn't sure about liking the ability to like things. He wasn't sure he wanted to care about caring. He wasn't sure about wanting the ability to want. Even when he was able to like things, Myrkul still unthinkingly knew that he didn't have enough data. He worried about how he didn't have an answer. He just either had it or didn't have it before. He was either correct or incorrect before. He wondered what it all meant, if it mattered at all. If meaning or mattering meant anything or mattered, and if they did or didn't, should he care? Certainly none of it had mattered before. His non-emotional self knew that it needed more data. His emotional self wanted nothing more than to gorge and drown in the feeling Stephen felt when he realized these people were not like the orcs. And so he would speak to Stephen in his dreams.
Stephen?
Myrkul asked the boy. They were in an offshoot of his throne room, a side chamber. It was the coziest place in Myrkul's palace mausoleum, a place that he felt Stephen might find calming. The stained glass window had a warm light coming through it, and Myrkul made it feel warm in there temperature-wise too now that he thought about it. The boy opened his eyes slowly, not moving a millimeter otherwise, looking up at Myrkul in terror just as he had toward Claire those first few days. That terror had been so absolute that it was indistinguishable, in fact. It was a valid fear. A 15-foot-tall, comparatively infinitely powerful skeleton. But as this emotion stabbed and spread through the god's mind, he found, sickeningly, that there was no way to turn it off. Myrkul could not look away as he had before, now that this radiation source of emotion was feet from him in his domain. Desperately, Myrkul conjured a source of sound, the exact sound of Michael's flock singing the song that Stephen had so enjoyed. Myrkul summoned the illusion of Stephen and Claire's tent around them, saying to Stephen not in words, but in a language they both understood, words that Claire had said over and over again.
I'm not going to hurt you.
Myrkul summoned food, tea, and a table to place it on next to Stephen's bed, motioning for him that he could have it, and relievingly, that worked. Stephen calmed, not fully putting anything together, but recognizing a few notions. He turned from terror to just deep apprehension and worry, which Myrkul could tolerate. Stephen could tell that the images of the tent were an illusion, and so Myrkul made them slowly fade. They both took a moment to calm further. Stephen could feel his blood pumping in his veins. Myrkul felt himself slightly vibrating with a lack of blood.
My name is Myrkul.
The god said softly to the boy, who was still cowering under the covers.
I'm Claire and Elder Michael's god. I will not hurt you. I only wanted to speak to you.
Stephen nervously thought.
Indeed.
Myrkul muttered to himself, empty core still churning with Stephen's emotions that there was no way to distance himself from. Stephen still didn't move a millimeter, and it occurred to Myrkul that he also didn't know what to do now.
I want to be your friend,
Myrkul told him. Myrkul knew that Stephen felt he didn't have much of a choice in the matter, and so he was not surprised when Stephen insincerely but politely agreed from under the blankets. Okay.
Do you know where we are?
Stephen paused to fearfully look around more, taking it in and breathing the heavenly air. While it dawned on him, he wilted with even more shock. I smell all the gods?
This is Celestia, my realm of it, specifically.
It smells nice, Stephen complimented despite his horror.
Thank you.
Knowing him fully now, Myrkul knew the answer that Stephen would have had to every question he might ask, and every reaction he would have to what Myrkul was going to tell him. But it wasn't the contents that mattered. For the first time in eternity, it was the conversation itself. Am I dead? Stephen asked him.
No. This is a form of dream. You'll be normal when you wake up.
Stephen meant no offense, but asked him carefully, why?
You make me happy. And I am trying to figure out why.
Stephen just stared up at him with stiff bewilderment.
I also have no idea how.
Myrkul agreed to what Stephen's next question was about to be. Magic?
Maybe.
Myrkul knew that Stephen was so scared that if he had been in his mortal form, he would have blacked out. So the god took a slice of the soft, sweet manna that he'd summoned, never having eaten before but knowing it was good, and offered it directly to Stephen. Stephen, again, feeling that he could not refuse, slowly rose up to sit in the bed and accepted the bread with a shaking claw of a hand. Myrkul pondered, for the first time, his perfectly bleached and straight bone fingers against Stephen's excuses for the same. Having that food in hand, though, just as with Claire, calmed Stephen considerably. Giving him a moment to swallow the bite and then ponder how amazing it felt and tasted, Myrkul informed him.
I want to look at you more closely.
Stephen was amiable, still feeling like he had little choice in the matter, but the god hadn't hurt him so far, and Myrkul took great care to continue not to do so, as he figuratively spread him out under a microscope while Stephen continued to eat holy bread.
Pelor.
Myrkul noted professionally, metaphorically and passionlessly flicking the glitter left behind of the sun god off Stephen's shoulder. The mortal was more pleasing to Myrkul's eye without another god's touch left on him. Myrkul promptly marked Stephen as his own, and the swirling light of his soul now contained just a drop of black ink.
You were not always like this. The orcs hurt you. You have scars on your brain. I think your brain damage altered your mind, which, over time, altered your soul.
Broken, Stephen said softly.
Different.
Myrkul demanded he think instead. The millisecond of low self-esteem Stephen had felt and therefore made Myrkul feel enraged Myrkul to the core. The god made it clear that he was not angry at Stephen, but angry at others who had spoken down to him. The boy still felt darkness when he thought about himself, but saw Myrkul in slightly more light after the god had, albeit forcefully, encouraged him.
I've never felt emotions before. This makes you very special. I don't know if I've just never met someone like you before, or if you're the first person like this. You make me happy. I've never been happy before. I've never been sad before either, but because of this, you are very, very special to me, Stephen.
Slowly, even in heaven, the boy slowly understood. His eyes widened in surprise, and then all-consuming heartache. Ever? The boy asked.
Ever.
I want to make you happy, Myrkul, Stephen said with wonder. Claire makes me happy, the boy offered, trying to help the god he now felt pity for. From Stephen's point of view, even Stephen had been happy on mornings when the orcs left him alone, on days where they fed him without making him do anything, and poor Myrkul didn't even have someone like Claire to be nice to him.
I want to be your friend.
Myrkul repeated.
I want to be your celestial, Claire.
Myrkul knew that Stephen was thinking that he needed to be Myrkul's Claire instead. Claire said I make her happy when I'm happy. She knows I thank her for it.
Exactly. I want to make you happy because it makes me happy.
You're a strong friend, Stephen said pragmatically.
I am.
Even with this friendship blooming, the recursive energy in the room was getting to be too much. In the moment of feeling Stephen's emotions, Myrkul sensed his own reactions. Myrkul then reacted to feeling his own reaction to reacting to Stephen's reactions.
Do you want to go for a walk? I will take on your limp for now.
That's something you can do?
I'm a god. I can do anything.
Stephen buckled with shock as his form no longer felt earthly limitations. Okay. He almost literally hopped out of the bed with wonder while looking at his legs and hands that, while still crooked, functioned easily, and Myrkul stood with a slight tremor to his step. While most would have been put off by the sheer amount of death, the raw coldness of a cemetery, echoes of grief, and the idea of corpses not so far beneath their feet, Stephen did not remember what a graveyard was. He did not wonder what the significance of so many grand carved stones and monoliths with words that he could not read written on them implied. He only took note that there were many of these stones in Myrkul's domain, and did not think on it past that. Myrkul's palace mausoleum was not ornate, rather taking on the capstone form of the oppressiveness and immovable, inevitable, infallible concept of death. The gray marble towered above with thick, heavy lines, and they did not tour the inside, but rather Myrkul took Stephen to a softly edged path through bare trees and dry grass swaying in the empty breeze, where they walked among the headstones and crypts that were all well settled into the old moss of the eternally late autumn forest. Walking slowly, no hurry, all of time to meander on the endless path before them, Myrkul told Stephen all about himself. His purpose, the purpose of every god, the breadth of good and evil, all that was in between, and how it all changed just depending on who was telling the story. The way he had been working the last 6,000 years, what his people wanted and did, their theories about the universe, all of the world's history, and lastly, how useless all of this had been.
though, of course, Myrkul hadn't been frustrated by any of it so far. For most of the philosophical, Stephen was unbothered by Myrkul's darker outlook, and just very interested in learning about his new friends. For all of the history and more broad theology, he was mostly just confused, though thoroughly interested, occasionally adding to the conversation with small asides about his own life or other people he had seen in order to show that he understood or to ask questions. And while Myrkul knew that Stephen would forget most of it upon waking, and that he could have just made Stephen understand in an instant, the conversation was what was important. So Myrkul took all of the time in their pocket of endless time needed to verbally explain. As they were in heaven, where it was impossible to tire or get bored, without strain on either of them, Stephen eventually beheld it all and understood everything. Myrkul then came back to the beginning and explained at length again how Stephen was unique.
Math is a mortal concept, for example. I understand it because my followers do, but it doesn't apply to me, so I only conceive of it in the same frame that I understand everything they lend to me. Math has no bearing on the universe other than mortals pretending it does, so they can standardize the information they share with each other. Therefore, it is as foreign to me as the need to eat. It is nothing. If I have ever told someone a number or explained a fact about the universe using a number, I would merely use it as a synonym in the way that a fluent speaker might say a simpler word when describing something to a person who is new to the language. I will not be saying what I actually mean, what the real word is. Much will be lost in translation because the person who does not speak the language cannot yet conceive the words that are the true definition, words made specifically to describe and dictate the concept, like how scientists name new elements and the names of theories when they're discovered. You can describe these in a sideways way, but you cannot say the true definition without using the word. Gravity, for example. You can call it a force, but this is incorrect. There are so many other forces. Gravity was invented by God. Without him, it no longer exists. Nothing replaces it if he's gone. It no longer existing does not mean that we are now going to be in the opposite of it. It just no longer exists. I am not a creature that was made by God. I am not beholden to the concepts he created, like the mortal's math or time. I am not a creature within God's engine, and so I abide by gravity and time merely by peer pressure and for the sake of consistency so I can be perceived. If I decided so, I could make myself no longer beholden to gravity, and I would not merely float. It would just no longer exist to me. You, in the same vein, have never considered gravity. You have never considered math or time. You do not know the secrets and hidden ways to understand the universe, and therefore they don't exist to you. The universe just is. You are just in it, and that is where your comprehension stops. For someone bound to this world, but thinking outside of it, of course it doesn't make sense to you. Your soul and mind are just as complex as any other mortals, but the way you use it and where you use it is different. You're not stupid, you're different. You do not think in the same frame all other mortals do. Not even infants or children who also know nothing of these concepts, because mortals of all intelligences and educations are held back by the way I think making no sense to them. The desire for things to make sense. Things you do not see do not exist, but if you can see it, then it just is, no matter how inconceivable to anyone else. Nothing makes sense to you, ever, so you don't question it. Presented with the cosmic, the eldritch, or the mundane, it would change nothing for you. You just take it in stride, and so it is nearly effortless to speak to you. You and I do not think in the same box, but we do not think in the same box as anyone else does, either.
Huh, Stephen said with a vague appreciation. perfectly and wonderfully exemplifying exactly what Myrkul had just described.
It is because of this, I believe, that you are able to affect me so much. When I can enjoy you, I do. I especially enjoy you when you are enjoying yourself. I could adjust your brain chemicals to make you happy every moment, but I don't think it would be the same and would eventually kill you. So what things are you afraid of or unhappy with so I can fix them? I want you to be happy.
Myrkul knew already, but he just wanted to hear Stephen say it. The work's coming back. Stephen fretted immediately.
No orc will ever hurt you again. Even if you face one in battle, I will smite it myself.
Stephen's lips parted a little as he understood that the god meant what he said, and was absolutely capable of doing it.
To help with that, I want to give you some magic. If you train with it, you could be as strong as Myrkul someday. If I decide I like emotions and keep you around as long as I've kept Myrkul,
Myrkul thought, keenly aware that emotions were growing on him with each moment. Stephen's eye, the only eye between the two of them, went as wide as a dinner plate. What will I do with it?
protect yourself. And Claire. Some other minor things, too.
I've never done magic before, the boy confessed as he tried not to swoon.
When you need it, you will know how to do it. What else are you afraid of?
Claire leaving me? Even Stephen knew that little magic could help that, as unlikely as it was.
She would sooner leave the church, taking you with her.
Myrkul decided he would personally prevent this if it ever came up.
What else?
Why is Elder Myrkul so mad at me?
He's jealous. Pathetic. Despite all his power, if I spoke to him frankly, as we are doing now, he would go insane from being exposed to my bare visage while still in a mortal form. You, however...
I'm different, Stephen said in the new adjective as he'd been commanded, but he still said it with an ashamed tone.
You are different.
Myrkul demanded in a determinedly self-enlightened tone.
Do not let Myrkul speak down to you, but don't be overtly confrontational about it. Despite his idiocy of being threatened by you, he is useful, and I still need him. Try to tone down how much we talk. Don't show it off. Try not to talk about it to anyone but Myrkul or Claire.
Yeah. I thought he wanted to hurt me.
He did.
Does he want to hurt Claire?
He pondered it.
Could you tell him not to? She's really nice to me. I didn't mean to drag her into this. I didn't mean to drag myself into it either, but I feel like it's gonna be okay as long as she's okay.
To the full extent of my power, I will not allow Myrkul or any other person on Earth or being on any other plane to harm Claire.
Myrkul promised. He had never promised such a thing to any person before. He was shocked at how good it felt. To make a promise, to tell someone that they were safe, that he had the power to protect something for them, that he could do a favor. Not even that he was gaining one in return, but knowing Stephen's relief and thankfulness and hope. He felt himself swell. Just a handful of words made Stephen so happy, and nothing made Myrkul more triumphant than knowing he could keep that promise just as easily as he'd said it. For the very first time, Myrkul's empty, skeleton chest felt full. Thank you, Stephen said brightly, bringing Myrkul back out of his contemplations. I'm still definitely gonna be like her brother or whatever, but I'm not as strong as I used to be. And compared to people like Myrkul and you, I'm not strong at all.
Quite.
Myrkul said dryly, placing his thumb and finger to his chin.
But I am pondering something to do with that.
Oh?
I enjoy your emotions. I'm in your head nearly every moment. It is irresistible because it is all just so new, but your pain is annoying. I've never been annoyed before, come to think of it.
Oh, I'm not nearly as much anymore. It's nothing compared to before. Oh my gosh. Thank you for that, by the way. They had arrived at a cliff, and Myrkul stared out into the distance, looking out at his neighbors, the only beings powerful enough to take this from him. The only beings able to end the joy that he felt from promising Stephen that he would keep him and his mother safe.
I can feel everything you feel. Even your negative emotions are so strange to me that I must drown myself in them. Each one is more consuming than the last. But rest assured, I have not ever before, and in fact refuse, to be afraid. And so you should not feel fear either. From now on, just tell yourself that everything will be fine. Because I will ensure that it will be. Think nothing of your pain, and think nothing of the memories of when it was worse. While I will not keep you from stubbing your toe or being insulted, barring a direct, seditious act of another god, you will never face injury of that nature, in your heart or physically, for the rest of eternity. Fear is something I refuse to feel, regardless of how interesting of a concept it is to explore.
Fear is scary. Stephen distantly nodded to agree, as he sat down in the grass, joining Myrkul and looking out at the celestial sea and the beam. Myrkul looked down at him, at first incredulous that Stephen had just said that with full sincerity, but then remembering that, of course he had. It was Stephen he was talking to. Myrkul then followed Stephen's eye line over the view, and, newly, Myrkul pondered the celestial sea, too. Seeing the gentle waves, the marble wheel spokes, the auroras and comets, and how all of the celestial sunset and starlight shine down upon his own domain. Miles and miles and miles of mausoleums, monuments, and headstones, grim mansions where his favored lived out their eternal lives in calm, quiet peace. Peace.
I have viewed this cliffside millions of times.
Myrkul whispered, realizing that he felt at peace for the very first time. It's a pretty view, Stephen said with a few nods. We're really high up, and the weather's nice today.
It's heaven. The weather's nice every day.
Is it really?
I'm a god. It's my realm. I can make the weather however I want to.
Oh yeah, and then you only wear the cloak, so you have to make the weather nice to be comfortable. Wow. Stephen looked up at Myrkul in wonder, thinking only of the convenience of never having to change clothes, instead of the convenience of controlling the forces of nature.
Sure, Stephen,
Myrkul told him. Stephen nodded his head to congratulate himself about guessing right, and they went back to their sightseeing, watching a flock of solars fly over Chunatea's place. Myrkul felt the breeze grow around them. Regardless of knowing that he was causing it, Myrkul felt the soft rush on Stephen's face and then on his own bones. It was just cool enough to enjoy how warm one's clothes were. Myrkul decided to make the wind smell like cinnamon and vanilla. He listened to dead leaves rustle around them and float down the cliff. Myrkul saw that Stephen had closed his eyes, digging his fingers into the crunchy mulch as he sat on the ledge, just feeling the starlight on his skin and deeply drinking in the holy air. Myrkul watched his paladin enjoy his heaven, as he, for the first time, enjoyed it himself. Content for the first time. Excited for the first time. Excited to feel this way again and again and again.
Can I come here when I die? Stephen asked spontaneously.
I would never dream of you going anywhere else.
Myrkul had to work very hard to phrase it other than, "You will never escape my grasp." Thank you.
You're welcome, Stephen.
I want to show Claire this spot.
Of course.
Claire told me to think of safe places. I'm going to think about this spot when I'm scared.
It will always be here, waiting just for you.
Thank you. And I mean, you being here's the best part of it. I love having nice friends, like you and Claire and everybody. I never want to leave. I've never been so happy because you guys are so nice to me. It was so odd to feel love being directed toward himself. Through Stephen, Myrkul felt himself loving himself.
I will be with you every moment of your days, Stephen.
You'll make me dream every day?
No. Probably not, anyway. But know that I am always there. You will never be alone as long as you live.
Really? It's so scary being alone. I never know what I'm supposed to do.
If you ever need guidance, I will have you dream of what to do. Though I may not at times, if it is something insignificant.
Really? That's awesome.
I'm happy that you're happy. And that makes me happy. And that makes me happy.
Do you dream, Myrkul?
No.
Do you sleep?
No.
No?
No.
Maybe I can teach you. With you teaching me all the magic stuff and God stuff, maybe I can find something to teach you, Stephen said, swinging his feet as he sat on the edge of the cliff still. Myrkul knew that sleep was impossible, though he had previously thought emotions beyond vague yearning were impossible. So now he was unsure. He then pondered if it was impossible only because he hadn't tried before, and that being a god, if he could make himself a god who slept as well. He decided for the moment that he didn't want to sleep through anything important, but maybe he would try later.
If you find a way to teach me how to sleep, you let me know.
Myrkul decided, knowing that Stephen never could, but wanting to make him feel useful.
Though, I may honestly be afraid to try.
And the idea that he might be afraid of his own volition someday, and not just through Stephen's thoughts, scared him more than anything else ever had before. Even though Myrkul had already decided that he was incapable of being afraid. Troubling. At any rate, Myrkul sighed at the scene and told Stephen,
It's almost time for you to wake up. While I'm still working on a way to make your body better, I'm going to make you able to speak Common.
Common?
It's the language Claire speaks.
What? Really?
Yes. It's getting tedious that you can't. You will still not be very good at it, and will forget how to speak Orcish, however.
Oh, that's okay. Oh my gosh, Claire won't have to use the paint leaves to talk to me anymore.
That's called a book. And in addition to her, you'll be able to talk to everyone else. And Myrkul won't have to waste his magic to speak to you in that way anymore.
Oh, thank you, Myrkul. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna say so much stuff. I'm gonna talk all the time. I can't wait to tell Claire so much.
Myrkul will be unhappy, but the others will be excited. I haven't blessed them with a proper miracle in some time.
Cool. Well, is there anything I can tell Myrkul to make him happier?
No, but I have an idea in mind for that too. I'm going to talk to him tonight also. Well, I've been speaking to him technically at the same time. I can speak to several different people at once.
Myrkul went ahead and explained before Stephen asked. Really? Wow. How do you not get confused?
I'm very old. And smart. So I can multitask.
Oh, you've practiced.
Yes.
Myrkul wondered if he was feeling what others called ego for the first time.
Well, go have fun talking. I'll see you again later.
Bye, Myrkul!
Goodbye, Stephen.
Myrkul let his paladin look at the view one more time. And then he waved his hand, and Stephen was gone. That night, moving on from the town after Lovenkond led the daring rescue and escape, they set up a quick camp, stealthily, mostly keeping watch. Very few bothered to fully set up tents, but it was looking like rain, so Michael was within his. He knew that he had to confront Stephen more, but first he was determined to confront his god. The demon swore that after he rested, he would plunge the communion blade into his heart 100 times if he had to. He wouldn't stop until he got answers as to what spite or mocking his god was on about. Under his tent, in the cover of night, the demon champion forced himself into frustrated, unhappy sleep. Sleep that, perhaps for the first time in decades, gave him a good dream. Michael had waited for this vision for nearly 1,500 years. He tossed and turned in his sleep so hard that he nearly woke up a few times, but Lewis knew better than to interrupt when this happened, and very likely just got out of bed to wait until it was over. Michael would have woken Lewis up afterwards anyway. He always jumped out of bed to scramble to write down everything he'd seen before he forgot it, and interrogated Lewis, mostly so he could interrogate himself about what it could mean. Inside the tumbling, rocking visions of sleep, Michael saw what Myrkul had been dangling over him the entire time Michael had been a demon. The ultimate carrot. His soul. Michael then saw something impossible. So impossible that he'd nearly laughed at God out loud. He saw the communion blade inside Stephen's hand. Just a flash of the gnarled, missing fingers around the hilt. A flash of black wings, the gyrations of combat, and the blade sinking into a great light that widened out his dream vision like a flashbang. The dream had blind spots as it transitioned to an absolutely gorgeous blonde man, talking very excitedly while Michael, Lewis, and this man stood in a library. The library turned to the Goldbury skyline, then the streets of Rivermouth. Michael saw their group's numbers splitting off and going their separate ways. Then what he understood was a core group that went on to Stone Garden, the islands of the astral plane, the plane of water, a shot of the beam in the background while they stood close to it on an island. He saw them standing in a massive graveyard, the likes of which Michael had never seen, again with the beam close in the background. He saw this beautiful blonde man up close and realized with so much shock that he yelped a gasp as he realized it was Stephen. Perfect, strong, and absolutely oozing power. The command was clear.
Stephen is important. Stephen is a key. Make him strong, focus your efforts, and I may, finally, eternally reward you.
Michael woke with his head pounding and deliriously dizzy. Lewis was indeed standing beside the bed with nothing but a blanket over his shoulders and an irritated look on his face. Michael knew that this promise of his soul was more concrete than anything his god had ever told him about it before. It had always been so far away, so far that Michael knew he shouldn't even consider it in the realm of possibility yet. Never before had his god even suggested that it might be accomplished soon. Michael nearly screamed as he stumbled out of bed to a table and began writing, muttering what he'd seen and trying to put the images in order and on paper. Whatever this instruction was really getting at, the specifics, Michael knew that it was possibly the most important thing his god had ever commanded him to do if his soul was the reward. He praised Myrkul in prayer and begged the god to allow the dream to stay in his memories as long as possible so he could do what Myrkul had demanded. After Michael had scribbled and scribbled and scribbled, he sat back and pondered the most ridiculous image so far. Stephen, holding the communion blade. What metaphor could that possibly be? Michael's first thought was about Stephen being able to smell magic. Maybe Stephen could find the long-lost Fourth Communion Blade. It seemed the most compelling possibility. It was certainly something worth a soul. Michael would be rewarded with his soul, and Stephen would be granted a new body. Of course, Myrkul wanted the blade, and Stephen could find it. To accomplish this, Michael was going to need to significantly thin down their number so they could move faster and quieter to travel to a great deal of libraries, just as Stephen had suggested now that he thought about it, one of which would have the key knowledge or lore to know where it was. Perhaps Michael needed to split up the group to cover more libraries at once. He brainstormed possibilities, and while he was consumed by it and flipping through older notes of other prophecy, Lewis mocked him. Maybe Myrkul wants Stephen to replace you, like he made fun of you in the last few dreams you had. He'll give you your soul when Stephen becomes champion. Give him a new body when he ascends.
Don't be ridiculous, Michael muttered while he pulled out a few more notebooks. He was too overwhelmed by the idea of finally being allowed to die that he didn't bother telling Lewis off for taunting him so. Lewis shrugged and got back in bed while Michael went absolutely nuts at his desk. Claire had gone with several others to wash her and Stephen's bloody clothes at a creek not far away. Stephen sat a few yards from the smoldering remains of a fire, helping by hanging other people's clothes on trees nearby so they'd dry faster. It was the first camp chore he'd ever helped with since joining them. About time, Michael's shepherd brain thought. We will be having your oath ceremony tomorrow, Michael told him telepathically. He allowed emotion to come through his mental voice, that emotion being the cold determination of a man who was chest-deep in schemes. Stephen only nodded, having smelt Michael approaching. You already knew? Michael asked him flatly. No, he said that he'd given it to me out of order, that there was supposed to be a thing you had to do. Out of the ordinary, Michael contemptuously agreed. What do I have to do? I have to cut you with the communion blade. Other than that, nothing. You just stand there while I bless you. I'll give a brief sermon. There will be some celebration, and afterward I will be giving you a great deal of drugs, so you might get a vision from him. Oh, cool. Raven's Bane and potion base, mostly. Cool. Raven's Bane is a mushroom. That was going to be my next question. You're about to tell me that you can get visions from him while sober, aren't you? No. I can, but I was afraid you would get angry about it again. I haven't stopped being angry. Stephen cringed, but then spoke out loud outside of Michael's telepathy. He teach me calling. He say that should make you happier? That you not have to think so magically to talk to me? Michael turned and punched a tree, almost cracking it in half, following through the blow's power and striding away. Claire! The demon yelled through thaumaturgy. The girl snapped up away from the riverbank in panic, but deflated when she saw Stephen across the camp and away from Michael, who was now halfway toward her. Yes? Go talk to him. What? Talk to him, he roared, pointing a reddening finger. Bewildered and scared, Claire trotted out of the water and tugged on her boots. She hesitantly passed Michael, and he gave her nothing other than an additional commanding stare. She reached Stephen, and the boy told her, I'm so sorry. I forgot I talk now. I just remember when I remember I could tell Michael. Myrkul, Stephen confirmed. He teach me how to talk. He was excited to remember that Claire would be much more pleased than Michael, no matter what was happening. Claire merely screamed and collapsed on her boy. Hey, it's your GM, Bailey Ford. I would like to thank our regular players, Darian, Matt, and Ian, Hip for our cover art, and Tabletop Audio for our background music. You can find us on Twitter at @CIllithids, and thank you especially for listening.